Anyways, those days of keeping my light inside are gone. I gotta share it here, or in the art, or in the writing. Unwittingly, I'm seeking all these things that he already sought. Buddy? Oh, squirrel. Morning, everyone. It's time to get away from all the busy cars for a little bit, and we're gonna go on a little hike again. And another morning of magical fog. And if you've been watching some of the work lately, you know that it's been February and playing with coffee, as I do annually this year. And I've been working on Yeats, William Butler Yeats, and he's really pervaded a lot of my life, kind of from the edge, the proximity of it, where I'll hear about him and I go, oh, that's Yeats too. That's very profound. That's a great quote. That's a great poem. And he just keeps popping up like that. And I've known for a while that he is very much synonymous with storytelling and poetry, and notably preserving the culture of the Fae in Ireland. And I remember, I don't know if it was the first time I heard about Yeats, or maybe I heard him from my English teachers. I probably did, but I'd mentioned in the video previous, where I was reading the Yeats poems, that there was a song by the Cranberries called Yeats' Grave, which never really grabbed me, but kind of added to the aura of mysticism that I felt the Cranberries automatically had from Ireland. And full disclosure, I'm not like a Cranberries fan per se. That first album was very captivating to me, but on the whole, I feel that it was, just another one of those alternative albums. And there's something about Ireland which we can all relate to, and I certainly have it in my blood. It's in the ancestry somewhere. But I've always just kind of felt this draw to all things Irish. But Yeats' Grave is a song that Dolores O'Riordan wrote, and whenever I would think of W.B. Yeats, and maybe you can relate to this, I would have this automatic association of coolness, because he was like this writer I didn't know much about, but he was mentioned in a song by a very cool band. So he automatically got this kind of rock and roll or alternative rock quality. So that's just automatically cool. Which is, when you think about it, a lot of these references to history or lit or science or whatever, if you get some kind of like rock star or pop artist mentioning it in their song, and this might be a generational thing too, because music is, I think, a much more compartmentalized influence on us than it used to be. Now we have tech, and we've gotten a lot of revolution that various engineers just keep adding to our society, that give us more conveniences, they give us more abilities to pursue what we want to do. And there was a time when you didn't have any of that access before the internet, or before social media, before TikTok, before Instagram could give you like a one-person business that you could just run from your phone. I need to learn that. But, there was, I think, this point where it just be, well, I would say that the way things used to be is you went and you physically got an album of music and you poured over all the liner notes in there. The very strategic photography could make an impression on your whole 6 months or something, or a couple years when you're younger. And if you're like me, you're out in the countryside. That's, I grew up in the countryside, and then eventually I went to the big city for 20 years, but didn't have a driver's license. So if you got a little cassette album and it just had all these little goodies and lyrics that you could just read over and over and over again, well, it was quite a extra gift to unravel a mystery of lyrics or a name of a song that referenced to something in literature. And it would just open this whole other world, and it would automatically have that association of cool with it because it was this awesome rock star that just pointed your way to that. And it was also, I think, a little more direct example was if you had a singer singing about maybe a singer from a band of a previous generation. I remember Axl Rose talking about how he visited the grave of Jim Morrison, and I think it was Joseph Campbell who said, when you visit the grave of someone you looked up to, it's because you want to end up the way they ended up. Ooh, you get chills from that? Kind of haunting. So any of you, well, I think, now we have influencers who it's their job to kind of make that association of, whatever their brand is, that this way you will associate their brand with another brand that's paying them handsomely. So I'm looking at about, I don't know, let's see, from 94, 2004, that's 10 years, 2014, that's 20 years, 24, so that's about 31 years ago, that song comes out, Yeat's Grave, which again, I'm not even that into the song. I can barely recall how it goes. But that's about 31 years that I've been dancing with this specter of Yeats around. And it's so crazy. I was reading about him, and it's almost like unwittingly I'm seeking all these things that he already sought, which is really kind of affirming in a way. I don't think I'm the first to do anything. So I don't go, oh, he already did that. I just go, wow, that's greatness right there. That's all I needed. I'm on the right track. But once you sit down and look at his poems, I think he is just so accessible. And I think he needed to be. I think that he's coming out of this time when Ireland is really getting to rediscover herself after all that oppressive British devastation on their culture. And I'm not going to say Britain didn't give anything positive to them. There's always something positive. But he pretty much was resurrecting a national pride in their literature. He was like almost this, I don't want to say he was a one-man army, but he did a lot for rekindling an interest in literature and drama and theater. He even made a theater, what eventually became the Abbey Theater. I forget the name of the theater originally, but he was producing plays, he was writing them, he was corralling other writers, he was getting other actors. There were riots in the streets because some of the plays they'd be offensive to, of course, religious beliefs in some ways. And it's interesting. I think that he went a little more into the Protestant side, which you kind of had to do because if you wanted to go to school, you pretty much couldn't be like Irish Catholic. And but all that aside, the big thing with Yeats for me is he was recognizing that if you really wanted to get back to what Ireland is, learn the magic of Ireland. So on a previous video, I talked about how there is an existence of magic and there's proof in it everywhere you look. The thumbnail says magic exists. It's pretty easy to find. Or I'll put a link in the description. But he's really leaning into the magical world in Ireland that before was only seen as something that peasants or the superstitious look at. Here was this man who was getting the best education, and he was one of the most eloquent poets and hardworking and commanding so much respect. Can you imagine? He's sitting with his friends in whatever stuffy social set he's in this nation that is having this dialogue between two sects of Christianity. And he's talking about fairies and leprechauns and and how they're everywhere. And he's talking about the myths and all the superstitions. And this is the crazy thing, is Yeats will go on to not only be a poet, a dramatist, a philosopher of sorts, a liberator of Irish mythology, but he's also going to be a senator. So he's going to go so far, making so many of these accomplishments, but he unapologetically is bringing up the populist mythologies, the spirituality. There's a reason that this cow isn't giving milk. It's because you've pissed off the Fae, and I think that's so beautiful because, especially now, I think that, and I remember, I think it was Thomas Sowell who said that every country falls when the elites lose their relatability with the common man. The common man needs elites because the elites can kind of point the way of things to do, examples to follow. But what needs to happen is that you have a constant intermingling between the two. Once you get to the point where the elites just get to hang out with other elites, and then they just get to make their money with each other, and then they lose touch with the people that are pretty much the backbone of the nation, there's going to be this kind of like feedback loop in that elite side, and you're going to get too much intelligentsia and somewhere in between, the kind of bougie side. It's very fascinating philosophy that I see. I don't know, philosophy, is that word? But I see it just happening a lot. And when I was learning about Yeats, I really saw what a rare breed he was. That is an elite who didn't forget where he came from. It's very hard to find now. And his rich friends would just kind of like, they'd play it off like he was strange. But he is formidable. He knows what he's doing. You can't talk to him like he doesn't know what he's saying. And respect. Doing a little dive on his poems, I think the first thing that grabs me is it does feel like something that shows his command of language, his command of poetry. You can see it, of course. But there's something so accessible about it. It doesn't feel totally... oh, I love this. There's like this circle of eucalyptus trees there. At night, they've actually got them lit. It's on this man's property. It looks very ghostly. It's awesome. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, his poems. I thought I was going to be reading them and trying to just decipher way too much what they were saying, or feeling like, oh, this is from another time. Oh man. But then I would just get it. I think Robert Frost, I felt a similar thing. And I love how just kind of I relate to the countryside that Robert Frost grew up in. And I think that's part of why Robert Frost just comes off so grounded. I think the countryside really does a lot. Anyways, those days of keeping my light inside are gone. I gotta share it here, or in the art, or in the writing. It's funny, there's so many ways that we kind of self-censor, and it's important for like survival in many ways, but I think that at the same time there is something to be said for exploring the possibilities of what can be shared these days. I think we all want to know what's happening with each other, whether it's me on this little piece of screen talking to you, or maybe you feel inclined to leave me your thoughts on any of the subjects I talk about. And I think there's something very special about when that occurs between two parties, and I love the idea of that happening more and more, certainly in the ways that I find it. I think each day I seem to peel back a layer. I feel like Ghost in the Gaslight, for instance, about, I don't know, the last 10 years or so that I've been doing it, has just been all these wonderful onion layers of sharing these things I find, these discoveries I make. Whether it's changing art mediums, whether it's extending the length of the stories, whether it's coming on here and sharing a hike in a mystical cold morning where the fog comes out to say hi like an old friend who's been waiting to play. And all of this, I think, is good value for us to just get to know each other more and maybe surprise each other. It's a refreshing thing. I think that there is a lot of that happening now. To go on a little positive note about the modern times, I feel like those ideas I was talking about with Yeats, where he's kind of this lone man who it might seem is howling in the wind, drowned out by the crazy sounds of gusts of air and gales all over the place. But he was a sorcerer, he was a wizard. He cast all these magic spells on the printed page that would outlive his soul, or that would carry his soul. And putting all these things out there that I create, and the more I do, the more I find I can do, the more I see the possibilities, what can be done. Consistency has always been key. There's times where it's very difficult, but it has really helped me to make lots of challenges so that I just keep sharing these things out there. Because every one of them has some kind of idea. I don't always know what it is, but I come back and visit it, and then I see there's something really profound in there. Sometimes I take it up again. I make a second part to the story, or I revisit the painting and make a new one that's better. Now that I know the story, and now that it's been a few years. Oh, hey, buddy. All these little birds here. But I think we're in this time that I don't want to say what Yeats would think of it. I speculate maybe if he was a bit like older, who knows? He might be like, the problem with this and that, we had this, that. But if maybe you take young Yeats, then maybe he has a little more of that romanticist side to him. Who knows? But you know, there's nothing like the early morning crows. They're just so happy to be up, and they've got to tell everybody. It's a diurnal bird, which, by the way, I have a pet peeve about a lot of the art of crows and ravens. And this is when I painted my raven, which, by the way, if you haven't seen my reading of the raven, I'm very proud of it. You should check it out. I'll try to put that in the description too, if I remember. But I hate when artists draw and paint them in the night. I feel like it's just this kind of indulgent goth thing. Like we want to think that this bird that's all black is in the night. No, give that to the black cat. That's the black cat's place. But the crow, the corvids, you know, the bird that is crows and ravens, they live in the day, and that's part of what's so mystical about them. They're like this piece of black pitch that is in whatever scenery you're encountering, and they stand out. They look like they're not of this world. And I do find it's kind of a challenge to paint them sometimes, because I want to really celebrate their mysticism, and I'm thinking sometimes as a fantasy ghost storyteller, there's like this easy bait to make to put them in a world of night. But that is not what is so exciting about them. What's exciting is that you see them here in the daytime. The legend of the raven, I believe, is originally he was white, and he was Apollo's messenger. And then one day, I think he delivered a message I think that Apollo didn't like. I think it was maybe some goddess was like refusing him or something. Knowing Apollo, that's probably what the worst news entails. But Apollo was so mad that he threw a fireball at this poor raven and totally burned him. And so the raven was completely seared black from that. And that is the mark he wears. Don't shoot the messenger. But the joke's on Apollo. I think the raven became the most beautiful bird in the world. I mean, there's so many birds that are gorgeous, but yeah, isn't it exciting when you see how much the plebs, the so-called plebeians, are able to just kind of communicate what they feel to the rest of the world? We see it everywhere. I'm always inspired by it, and there's a reason that all the most popular voices in pop culture, the ones that have the most staying power, the voices of generations, are either blue collar or they're speaking blue collar values. Nobody cares about the rest of them. And I think we get to see that more and more. Oh, look at these apple trees. Right, look at these. I love apple trees. And like this one here. That is just one of the coolest trees. Apple trees and oak trees. And then probably olive trees. Those are all my favorites. Some of these are looking kind of sad right now, but maybe sometime we'll do a field trip and I'll show you some beautiful apple trees. But there's nothing like them. Anyway, hello again. So there seems to be this coalescing of the voices of the many who get to just kind of share all their points of view. And you've got a lot of these different platforms that make it possible to see that. That said, I know a lot of people and I relate to it. My heart goes out to them, and they just kind of like want to go off social media because they're just freaked out by all the news of the world. But also, there's just a lot of people that pretty much they just have one thing or another to say about the way they see the world, and they do it in such a hateful way. And it is really sad to see, and I don't begrudge anyone for just wanting to just cherry pick their social media. I mean, it's peace of mind. That's a very crucial part of a happy life. Just know when to just step back, recognize when you're maybe getting too much of a sugar rush or too addicted to the news cycle. To recognize that the news is a business to keep you not just informed, but addicted. That said, I think there is something to be said for how you can always find the positives. And I think that is maybe the most crucial ability to have. Keep that attitude of gratitude. And I think in my own experience, every February, for instance, when I'm playing with coffee stains and making fairies, and as I look into William Butler Yeats and his journey finding the Fae and the Faeries, I already know, because I've been doing this for 6 years or so with the fairies and the Fae art. But I already know the inspiration, the sustenance, the sheer fun, the magic that Yeats must have been feeling as he would constantly be compiling all this folklore and finding these stories, learning these legends, and finding them in his day-to-day life, the meaning, the relevance of it. And to be able to find that whether you look for the Fae, whether you find God in everything, that is so much more important to me and so much more interesting to me than to just go, oh, yeah, that's interesting. That's the science of that, blah, blah, blah. It's awesome that, people can just nerd out on, what makes a tree grow. I love that you can find the layers there. But if you are also someone who is taking all that kind of meticulous, technical, looking at everything literally, and then the way you're looking at the world, and you're just being kind of down in the dumps all the time about it, something ain't right. And these. Beautiful. Look at this tree here. What a fantastic soul. I love when you step out and you're like, man, this is a cold morning. Should I do this? And then you take the plunge, you step out, and before you know it, you are anything but cold. It's just a beautiful thing. So I think that part of the secret to Yeats' success, besides his amazing passion and hard work and unique talent and ability, is that he really looked at the beauty of this world around him, and he didn't need anyone else to tell him what he saw. He knew what he saw. And the more that he practiced it, the more that he dove into it, the more he showed people what that was. And isn't that just the way we should all be? If there's something that grabs you and you feel like there's a voice saying, don't do that because you might make this mistake, or people might laugh at you, or people might make this thing about you, isn't it worth it to actually just do that? I'd say that's living life there, by sharing your light no matter what people say or think. And I think that's just the best value. And that's the reason to do it. How many times have I just done stuff because I was scared? I mean, everything I'm doing now, I feel, is because I'm scared of it. So, and the great thing is I just keep finding things about it. And a lot of gifts come from that. I think it's a very fantastic way to live. I think that Yeats lived fantastically. We can all live fantastically. And I think the beautiful thing is that we can all share what we're feeling, and it'll bring us something very, very profound together. Something that occurred to me too is sometimes when I'm walking and I imagine, like if I have to get somewhere, I imagine there's a string tied to the base of my spine, an invisible string, and it's connected to where I'm going. And when I just focus on that string and not trying to walk faster, it's like the string just takes me there. Try this exercise. It never fails. I learned this in acting class when I was living in New York City. And when you're in New York City and you got to get somewhere, it can be very stressful. But when I would just do that string, it was like this part of me just lets nature take its course, and something's carrying me there. I just have to focus on that string, and the world can eat my dust. It's great exercise. I bring that up because I feel like it also melds very well with what I'm talking about, of just trusting what you want to do in the way that I see the example of Yeats. And I think that if you just focus on that string, that symbolic string of what you're doing, and you don't stress about how do I do it? You just go, nope, I'm doing it. That's just how it's going to be. And you just keep on that intention. Whenever that voice comes out, oh, how? And you say, I'm doing it. That's how. The how comes later. I'm sure that you have felt this in some way, as I have. And you have seen the possibilities, because they are out there. And all it takes is to do this once, and there's going to be this part of you that maybe you don't want to admit that actually enjoyed it and found that it works. And when I say you might not want to admit it, is because the other part are these long-held excuses that you have, and we all do this. I do this. Every day I do this. But the excuse kind of melts away. And there's this sense of, well, now I've got to get this going. And I think that's a really important thing. We've come to my tree here. This tree is so incredibly expansive. And we've had all these rains recently, similar to how it's in the cemetery, and all this beautiful mossy world is sprouting up. Let's pull back and look at this beauty. See why I just love oak trees? There's seriously nothing like them. Wow. There's the other one there, but nothing like this one. This guy just wants to feel everything. So if you don't take your example from William Butler Yeats, take an example out of the trees that are around you. Again, if you want to know ecstasy, study a tree. I can't say that enough. So, it is really also a nice project if there's someone from history in literature, or a painter, or some artist, or great speaker, scientist, engineer, poet, priest, I don't know. And you've been kind of interested in them. Let me get more trees here. I think it's worthwhile to make a little project about learning more of them. We're in this wonderful age of internet. I mean, you can grok it too. You can just ask Grok, and they just come up with all these. I mean, you can just learn so much right there. And maybe it's enough for you to say, oh, I want to learn more. This is worth my while. And I think you're going to find a part of yourself. I'm finding a part of myself in William Butler Yeats, and it's so exciting. And so exciting, I think, for Ghost in the Gaslight. I mean, there's a few poems I want to share more with you. And I find more in myself when I do that. And that's the whole reason that all of these luminaries left all this work years ago. I mean, we used to want to own books because we could just enjoy that and just constantly peel the layers off and be finding a new thing each time that we just dive into this world that this soul poured themselves out onto paper years ago to give to us. Not just because they wanted us to read it generations later, but because it was something that they had a fever to tell, a story. And wouldn't that be heartening? Wouldn't that be good value to be affected by that? Look at this. Look at all this. Absolutely. I like our hikes. They're great. Beautiful. And you guys too. Thanks for taking this with me. And I hope you enjoyed that Yeats video, that Yeats film I just made with all the poems. Maybe listen to it in different settings. I don't care. Maybe when you're going to sleep or something. But I just love what he brings out in me. And it was very exciting to share it with you. Thanks for taking this walk with me. We've had a gem of a time. And I would love to hear what you think about any of this stuff. That's always a wonderful payoff and a great way to support me. Also, if you like my videos and you watch them, if you're able to watch them to the end, that helps the algorithm send me out more. So it's another way that you can help support this artist. And of course, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't, and do leave me that little conversation. I love to get in there with y'all. So, it's just amazing out here. Well, take care, you beautiful, haunted romantics.